Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Communicator Training. Today, we're going to be focusing on the university brand and Instagram. So let's get started. First off, university brand. This university has three names that it identifies with: formal name, an informal name, and a nickname. Formally, this university is California State University, comma, Stanislaus. The informal version is Stanislaus State, and the nickname, Stan State. Moving on to logo use. The Stan State Shield is a single shade logo. Fun fact, back then the Stan State Shield used to be two shades of red. But for more information about brand and logo guidelines, you can visit csustan.edu/brand. And then next up, we have department logo. So department logos are also known as secondary identifiers, and we have two uses for them: formal use and an informal use. Now, with the formal use, it's often the department logo with the university name established onto it, and the informal use is the department logo without the university name. Moving on to university brand aid. As you can see, we have a warrior red, warrior gold, and dark gray. These are considered our primary colors that we use for branding. And below these colors are the hex codes. Continuing on, we also have dark red, shield red, and dark gold. These are also considered our primary colors that we use. Moving on to our secondary colors, we have lake blue, willow green, and sequoia tan. And last but not least, we have logo gray and goose gray. These are also considered our secondary colors. This next slide highlights Student Affairs Marcom. Here's what you can expect with updated request processes from our department. You can submit design submission forms, marketing request forms, email or team requests. What can you find with our resources? Student communications, visual branding aid, social media guidelines, student affairs communications groups, and media tools. And for our next slide, social media best practices. Creating content. So these are the questions that you should consider asking yourself. So the first one would be, what am I trying to convey? How can I convey this message? How does this support the students? Sometimes you have to put yourself in a perspective of the students and ask yourself, if I were a student, how would I become interested? And here are the guidelines that we like to use. Number one, clean and accessible design. Number two, limited use of text. Number three, photo and caption storytelling. Number four, photo and video based content. Number five, the 70-30 feed rule. And last but not least, number six, branding. So let's talk more about clean and accessible design. What a clean and accessible design looks like is that the visual is the main focus of the design with limited use of text. It can also be the design is eye-catching. And last but not least, the design puts forth professional content representing your department. Now that we learned more about clean and accessible designs, how do you guys feel about this post? Let's take a deep dive, shall we? All right. So as you can see, we have a student that's holding a flyer. Now, what we see from this flyer is a few words. However, these words are really hard to read. So is it really accessible to students? Sometimes we have to ask ourselves that. Now the question is, how can I relay this information and make it accessible for all students? Well, here's a few tips and tricks. Instead of taking a photo of the flyer, we can input all this information and utilize our caption resources so all students can know what's going on. We can also change this photo and make it more engaging. Be creative. Here's another example. I think this is a really laid out post. It's really well formatted. It talks about Men's Health Month. As you can see, there's not a lot of text. And I think they use a pretty fine use of duotone, which makes the post pop out a little more appealing to the students. You can also see that they use the formal branding, as we've stated before in previous slides. Now let's talk more about limited use of text. Sometimes we often have to ask each other, is the text necessary? What is the text trying to portray? And if needed, you can always use a title or a subtitle. You also want to make sure that the text graphic is oriented. You can also utilize the caption for additional text just so that the post is not too text heavy. You also want to make sure you avoid plain text with little to no visual component or photo. Now let's look at an example. As you can see, we have an American flag. There's no text whatsoever. However, we can kind of assume that this is a national holiday, perhaps Memorial Day, 4th of July, maybe Independence Day. Posts like these that are self-explanatory don't really necessarily have to have a text. Now let's look at the caption. Have a happy and safe 4th of July, warriors. We can see that they utilize the caption resources and which allowed them to have a pretty clear and visual photo without the use of the text. Moving forward, we have another example. Here we have their branding. They have a title or subtitle called giveaway. And they have a very simple and concise picture of a Keurig machine. We can also assume that this is an event that they're hosting, a giveaway. And if you look to our right here, we can also see that they utilize the captions resources. This prevents clutter and keeps your post from looking like a bulletin. Let's look at photo and caption storytelling. Sometimes when we tell a story, we want to make sure that the photo or graphic visual is the main highlight of the post. You should always have your photo be the hook and let the caption tell the story. Now, as you're making this post or photo, think to yourself this: what can I move to the caption? How can I visually tell my post? Now let's look at an example of what we just learned. As you can see from this post, the storytelling that's happening behind this photo. We can see that the patient is perhaps getting tested or getting some sort of flu shot. We have the nurse helping her out. Now let's look at the caption. Happy World Tuberculosis Day. Pretty self-explanatory. They're telling a story and they're keeping it very engaged. This prevents the post from being a little too overwhelming with text. Photo and video-based content. So flyers shouldn't be uploaded onto Instagram as a post, story, or reel. Content should be really engaged visually. Content that features photographs and video is more engaging than graphic-oriented posts. Now let's talk about the 70-30 feed rule. 70% of your content should be primarily photo or video. Meanwhile, 30% of your content may be graphic-oriented. This keeps an overall balance of your content and pivots from bulletin. Now let's look at examples of what that may look like. Now let's look at some examples. As you can see from the left side, this account contains graphics, photos, and videos. As we look to our right side, this account also has graphics, photos, and videos. These examples represent of what an account should look like. Now let's look at some bad examples. If you look to this account to the left side, you can see that majority of their posts are flyers or graphics. As we stated before, we want to prevent our account from looking like a bulletin. Now, if you look to your right side, we do have another account. It does have a variety of photos, graphics, and videos. However, we see that these photos are less of what the graphic is. For instance, if we look at the bottom middle photo of my pointer, we see that the template is taking over most of the post, and we can hardly see the photo. Last but not least, let's talk about branding. So the content should always be professional in tone and put your best work forward. You should always review the university guidelines along with the student affairs guidelines. Most importantly, you should build content that clearly shows a connection to your promotion. So reviewing the content, these are the questions that you should consider asking yourself. Does this clearly convey my message? Is this easy to understand or follow? Does this meet the guidelines? Sometimes you have to ask yourself, if I were a student, would I be interested? And that concludes our training, and I hope you guys have a good day.